Alright folks, we got tons of vegetables here from the garden. We got tomatoes, we got peppers, we got squash, zucchini, yellow squash, cucumbers, and I'm going to show you how I make a soup, delicious soup, using nothing but these ingredients, and we're not going to add anything that's store-bought from the store, nothing but fresh ingredients, and it's going to be absolutely delicious. Alright, so we're going to start by taking some of these tomatoes, and what I like to do with these smaller tomatoes is I cut them in half, and then I will cut them in half again this way, and then if the surface area is bigger than the size of a nickel, I'll cut them in half again. So what I'm looking for is something that's about the size of a nickel for the skin size. And the reason for that is because if it's bigger than that, the skin will come apart and it'll be a big piece of skin floating in your soup, and it gets to where it's hard to chew. It's hard to eat. But as long as it's the size of a nickel or smaller, you're okay, and it's not going to impede your eating and enjoyment of the soup. Now, you could take a tomato, you could dip it in boiling hot water, peel the skin off, just dip it in long enough, give it a few seconds, take it off. It's called parboiling, and get rid of the skin. But there's all kinds of nutrients and fiber and stuff here in the skin, so again, we're looking at a natural soup, and we're going to leave the skin on. So we're going to take and we're going to cut up a bunch of these tomatoes, and what I want to do is I want to fill the bottom of this pot here to where it's totally covered with tomatoes, and maybe about an inch or so deep. That's going to give me enough tomato juice for my soup. Now, so on the small tomatoes, I'm not worried about taking out this part here where the stem was at, but on a larger tomato, that would be chewy to eat. So I'm going to take a knife and I'm going to cut a cone down in there. See what we get out is a little cone shape, and we'll put that in the compost pile. And then the other thing I like to do is I like to take the bottom and real carefully just cut off that top piece of skin. Okay, and then that way makes it easier to cut, and I'm really not losing much of anything when I take that skin off. And then I can take my tomato and I can cut it. And again, I want pieces of the skin to not be bigger than about a nickel. So I'm going to cut it and dice it to where my skin pieces aren't no bigger than your thumbnail or a nickel or something. Alright, now folks, one thing I want to point out is these little cherry tomatoes. I like those. I like to eat them. I just sprinkle a little salt on them and pop them in my mouth. I like to eat those. These Roma style tomatoes, they're very firm, but I don't really like to eat them just as a tomato. So I'm going to make sure that any of these I've got I use up in my soup. Same thing with these. I don't know what they're called, but they're shaped like a strawberry. They're kind of weird. They're triangular. They're shaped like a strawberry or a chicken heart. And same thing. They're very firm, but I don't really think they have much flavor. So any of those that I've got, I'm going to make sure those go in the pot too. And then we've got these grape cluster type tomatoes where you can just peel off a segment of this and eat it. And they're really tasty, but they're kind of a pain in the butt. I really don't care for them that much. But they are flavorful, and so I'm going to make sure that these go in the pot too. And then we have regular, what I would call a table tomato, and I like to slice these up, sprinkle a little bit of salt on them, and eat them. So again, the cherry tomatoes and the regular table type tomatoes are the ones that I like to eat raw, and so all the other ones are the ones I'm going to make sure I put in my pot here for my soup. And you can see we still got some bottom of the pan left there, so we still got room for some more tomatoes in here. Alright, so if we look at our tomatoes here, you can see we've got got a good covering of tomatoes across the bottom of that pan, about an inch deep, and so we're going to call it good on tomatoes. Now the next thing I've got here is I've got this is one Bok Choy leaf, the leaf and then the stalk. I already cut it up to kind of fit it in the fridge overnight, but we're going to just slice this up, tear it up a little bit, and put it in there on top. Now if you don't want a piece of Bok Choy that big, an easy way to cut these down a little bit is just to snap them like that. And now you've got smaller pieces that you can cut the size. And we'll put the stalk in there. And then now for the stem, I like to just slice it up the middle. All the rest of this you can just kind of tear up, and you can actually just take it and kind of roll it a little bit, bend it over if you want to, and then we're going to slice it in pieces this way, and then when I'm done I'm going to come back and slice it long ways again to kind of make sure I don't have too long of strips. But this stuff will break down quite a bit when it cooks and boils, so it'll break up some. You really don't have to worry too much about having too long of strips. But you can see, you know, I might have some strips in here that are a little bit longer, like that one there, right? But if we just take this and just kind of slice it lengthwise a couple times, we shouldn't have any really long strips left in there after we've done this. And then just dump this in there too. And then next thing we're going to do is we're going to cut up some squash. Now I've got some yellow summer squash, and I'm going to cut the ends off just because those are typically a little tough. And then I'm going to cut my squash lengthwise, and then I'm going to cut it lengthwise. Actually, I'm probably going to cut it lengthwise twice more. So I've got that cut into threes. And the reason for that is when I go to cut these, again I'm looking to dice them. You know, I want to be able to get a spoonful of soup and have a piece of tomato and a piece of squash and a piece of, you know, bok choy or whatever, all in the same spoonful. And if I make these things too big, they won't all fit in a spoonful. So, you know, that's about as big as I want to go. And if this was a little bit bigger, I'd just take and cut these again to where, again, about the size of, you know, about the size of your fingernail is all the bigger that I want these. So you can get some, like I said, 2 or 3 ingredients on a spoon, get it in your mouth at the same time, versus having just one big chunk of squash, or I'm going to put some cucumber in here too, or one big chunk of zucchini or whatever. I don't want just one big chunk of something at a time. Alright, so we got a nice medium-sized zucchini here. Again, I'm going to cut the stem end off and the blossom end off, or the butt end. We're going to do this the same way we did the yellow squash. Cut it up the middle, cut it lengthwise 2 or 3 times, and then cut it again, and that will end up with our pieces diced. Now if you end up with a bigger piece like that, you can always just take and cut it up if you think you misjudged something and your pieces are too big, and just go back and have another hack at it. Alright, this is the fat end, this is the bigger pieces, and you can see that they're not too big. Plus these are going to cook down in size just a little bit, so they'll shrink a little bit as some of the liquid comes out of here. Now we're not adding any liquid to this soup. These squash and zucchini and everything else is going to lose a lot of liquid, and that's going to make the broth of our soup. Okay, so right now we got tomato underneath there, and then we got our bok choy, and then our zucchini and our yellow squash. Now we're going to put a cucumber in here too. So I've got a medium-sized cucumber. Again, going to cut just the butts off of these, the stem end and the blossom end. I'm going to use this exactly like I would any other squash. And you know, basically a cucumber is nothing but a squash anyway. And so when you cook this up, it's not going to taste as much like cucumber as what you think it might. It's going to taste more like cooked squash. You can believe that or not, but I definitely recommend adding some cucumber to your soup. It's going to make it wonderful. It really is. Now, I had some green onion tops in here the other day, and I just don't have any with me at the moment, but green onions, if you got those growing in the garden, cut some of those up, put those in there also. It's a good addition to this. We've got the bok choy, so I'm not real worried about not having any green onion in there, because we do have that. So you can see, you know, I've got a couple inches of vegetables in there. Again, we didn't measure this. We didn't measure it in cups or nothing, but we're looking at our depth. You know, everything we put in here was a layer. Let's say that that's a, you know, 3/8 of an inch or so, or you know, the thickness of the width of your fingernail. So we had about an inch of tomatoes, and then we'll have a layer of bok choy, a layer of zucchini, a layer of yellow squash, a layer of cucumbers, and then we're going to start this on low, because again, we're not adding no water to this. We're going to start this on low and put a cover on it, and as it cooks down, it's going to make its own liquid, its own broth for its own soup, and it's just going to be wonderful. Now, we also have these weird, some people call them Asian cucumbers, I think, or Japanese cucumbers. I'm not sure what the actual name for them is, but these are a good addition to this also. If I hadn't already put in the other cucumber, you could certainly put in some of this. It pretty much is going to taste the same once you get it cooked as a regular cucumber. So, but either one is fine for this type of soup. If you have other stuff that's growing in the garden that you really like, put it in here. This is just a basic demonstration of how you can use fresh vegetables with nothing else and make you an excellent soup using nothing but this. But if you got other ingredients, different ingredients, go for it. It's all just cooking down vegetables, and it's going to make its own broth, and it's just going to be fantastic. Now, if you're a meat eater, you can add some sausage. Take some sausage, cut it up, put it in here. That adds some more flavor and some meat to your dish. If not, that's okay. You don't have to use meat in here. It's going to be plenty tasty without it. If you've got some garlic, you can put garlic in there if you like that. I will be adding some garlic salt, but again, if you're trying to get by with no added salt or something, you don't have to add that. I just like it. And you know what? I almost forgot my favorite part, and that's the peppers. Now, normally if I only got a pepper or two to cut up, I like to cut these up with kitchen shears. But since I'm going to be doing several of these peppers at the same time, and I've actually got a little bit larger pepper over here I'm going to do, I'm going to just use these with the knife, and that way I can do a bunch of these at once. And I'm just going to cut them in thin slices, so they're just a thin ring of pepper. And I'm not taking the seeds out or anything. This is a real mild pepper that I'm putting in here. It's like a banana pepper, only milder than maybe what a lot of people would think of a banana pepper as. But it's a real mild pepper, so I'm just putting the whole thing, seeds and all. And I've also got some other peppers over here. Some of them are mild, some of them are hot. If you like hot peppers, obviously, invite you to put those in there. If you don't like hot peppers, don't put any hot peppers in there. If you don't like peppers, don't put any peppers at all. Again, this is going to be your recipe, your soup. I'm just showing you the basics of how to do it. So this is a little bit larger pepper, and this one here is fairly mild. I'm going to need a piece of it just to confirm that. Yeah, this is a mild pepper. It's a little bit more, it's a little stronger than like a bell pepper, but again, it's not real hot. I'm just going to slice it into strips, and then I can slice it crossways once I get these strips cut. And again, I'm not worried about taking out the seeds because it's not a hot pepper. Now I do have some Hungarian wax peppers over here. Those are hot, and I have some jalapeno peppers. Those are hot. A pot of this size, if I'm making it for somebody that doesn't eat hot stuff, I might put might put a jalapeno in there, or maybe a Hungarian wax pepper or something. This isn't the Hungarian wax, but it's something else. This is a hot pepper. So I'm just going to put one of these in there, and it won't be too overpowering in this amount of vegetable matter, this amount of soup. But again, go with whatever your taste buds are. You know how much hot pepper you like or don't like, or whatever. And if you're not sure about it, taste it here. You know, take a raw piece of it, especially if it's got a little bit of what they call the vein. Okay, see that white thing sticking up there? That's the vein of the pepper. Your heat is in the seeds and the veins. So if you're not sure how hot the pepper is, taste it here before you put it in your soup, and then end up with soup too hot to eat. And that's not too hot at all. It's got a little bit of spice to it, but it's not too bad. I think it's going to work out well. So now that we got those cut up, again, I'll add those to the pot, and we'll get back to cooking. And so now we're going to put this on low and let it simmer for several hours. We're going to put a top on that, and again, I'm going to put it on low, about between a 2 and a 3 on my burner over here, and I'm just going to let that set for a couple hours. And after an hour or so, I'll probably come and I'll stir it, because the tomatoes will be starting to cook and releasing their juices, and then I can start stirring it and get the other vegetables down closer to the heat, because remember, we're on simmer, and then they'll start cooking and releasing their juices. And as I get this to where there's a lot of juice in there flowing around and it's getting soupy, then I can turn the heat up a little bit to like a medium and let it boil a little bit, and cook a little bit quicker. But to get started, I want to cook slow, because I'm trying to get those vegetables to release those juices without adding any water. Because when you do it with just the juice from the vegetables, I mean, the flavor is just out of this world compared to if I just put a bunch of water in there and boiled these things. It's just not the same. Alright, so this has been on simmer for about 40 minutes. I'm just going to kind of make a hole in the middle. See, we got lots of juice there from the tomatoes and stuff. So so now that I don't have to worry about whether or not this stuff is in liquid at the bottom, I'm going to stir it up, and that way we get some of the squash and the vegetables are a little bit harder to cook, mixed up and down towards the bottom, so they can start cooking. I'm still going to leave this on. Actually, I might turn the heat up just a little bit, because as you can see, even if I smush this all down, it's really pretty liquidy. So I'm going to turn the heat up to maybe a 3.5, and we'll come back in another half an hour or so and check it and see how it's doing. Alright, so it's been half an hour or so, and look at that. We got these vegetables, they're cooking up. We got lots of broth there, and if I let this go for another half hour or so, you can see that the squash and stuff is starting to cook. But if I let this go for a little bit, this will get a little bit soupier, but not much. I don't like my soup real watery, but I think that's about how I like mine. So we're going to call this done. Like I said, you could let it cook for a little bit longer if you want, but depends on if you like your vegetables mushy or a little bit al dente. I'll get a fork here so you can kind of kind of see that that cuts pretty easy. They're not too mushy, but they're certainly done. So at any rate, hope that gives you some ideas on what to do with your vegetables out of the garden. Again, just cut them up, put them in a pot, cook them down. Don't add no water, don't add nothing. This stuff is so delicious with nothing but the juices from the vegetables. It's awesome.